it just struck an arrow straight into my heart. And the following morning, I had a poem called The Day I Didn't Kill Myself appear. And I say appear because that's how my poems come. They just seem to come through me, not from me. And as a result of that poem, which was really, it was a complete celebration. It was a gratitude poem about all the things that I have done and that I wouldn't have done if I had have driven off the mountains that day.
Hello and welcome to the Write the Book Inside You podcast. Tips, tools and interviews for coaches and healers like you who want to write a non-fiction book to boost your visibility, clients and cash flow while making a difference. I'm your host, Caryl Westmore, a multi-published author and energy psychology tapping book coach. Now let's jump into today's episode. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to DebS, who's completed her book and was having a chat with me in our Writing the Book Inside You Facebook group. We met and she is now going to tell us some of the changes she's making as she tweaks the final process of her book. Welcome, Deb. So Deb, you contacted me. You've been working, how long have you been working on your book?
I would say probably 1.5 to 2 years in total, but that's not been constant working on it. It's been put aside quite a lot, and which has actually been a really good process, because what I found is once I've put it aside and left it for a while and then gone through and read it again, it's like coming back at it with fresh eyes. So yes. Even though I really would have loved to have had it out before now, obviously but it's been a very organic process. Everything's organic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that people don't realize that. Some just sit down and write the book in a few weeks, and, I can help people with that. But other times, especially as I think, when we get round to the topic of your book, it's more a memoir, isn't it?
Yes,
so that is not something you can always just churn out, like a self-help book. So tell us about your book, and then we'll talk about titles, unless you've already decided on the title since we spoke.
Well, I have added a brilliant subtitle since we spoke earlier.
Okay, so just to in the context, we were chatting about your book. I knew nothing about it, and I made 2 suggestions a few hours ago, and we've jumped back on to see how that helped you. Is that right? How it helped you refocus. Okay, so tell the listeners how that happened.
The book initially was called How Words Can Change Your Life, or How Words Can Heal Your Life. It had 2 working titles, and it's essentially my memoir about how I became depressed following a divorce and then had a suicidal thought. And obviously I didn't follow up on that, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. It was initially all about the words that jumped into my head. Then it was about words that people had said to me. So that title seemed to make sense. Really, it's all about celebrating that there is such a thing as life after divorce. There is such a thing as life after depression. There is such a thing as life after having suicidal thoughts. And I was at a Poems and Pints evening, must have been before lockdown, so a while ago. And a lady read out a poem by American poet called Maggie Royer. And she also read a story she'd written, which was about her friend's suicide. And the poem was called The Morning After I Killed Myself. And it was written from the point of view of somebody wishing that they hadn't, but it was too late. And it just struck an arrow straight into my heart. And the following morning, I had a poem called The Day I Didn't Kill Myself appear. And I say appear because that's how my poems come. They just seem to come through me, not from me. And as a result of that poem, which was really, it was a complete celebration. It was a gratitude poem about all the things that I have done and that I wouldn't have done if I had have driven off the mountains that day. So that then gave me a much stronger idea for the title, which is The Day I Didn't Kill Myself, so after the poem. But I didn't have a very good subtitle. The subtitle was very wishy-washy. It was, and even as I'm going to say it, I know it was wishy-washy, because when I say it, it's like a journey through divorce, depression. And so even saying it doesn't sound great. So after we spoke earlier and you suggested that we put the word sort of empowering in there because this is what the book is all about. It's about giving people hope. It's about empowering them because it includes the self-help that I've come across myself that's helped me through the process. And it's all about celebrating as well. So you really helped me cement that sort of thought. And I've come up with the subtitle of Empowering You to Celebrate Life After Divorce, Depression and Suicidal Thoughts. Whether that's going to be the final subtitle, I don't know, but I think it's certainly much better than the one before. Even as I'm saying it, I can feel it.
You feel, that's great. And that's why it helps sometimes to just have a bit of a second eyes on what you're doing I haven't obviously looked at the actual book itself. The other thing that I'd like to just put on the table is you did say why you wrote the book. You said if it can help who. Now, who's it for? And what is your why?
Well, the reason I wrote it was because I just felt that if I could give anybody, just one person, hope or inspiration that there is a life after these things, because at the time I felt like there wasn't. I really felt like there was nothing left. I had nothing. I was nothing. And obviously, clearly I am. And it's taken a while to get there. So
could I interrupt you to go back to the beginning of the book, which how long ago was that? I mean, it's your story, your memoir, and it begins in a very powerful way now, because I just said to you, well, that'll be interesting to chat about, but how long ago was it so that listeners know?
Well, I was in my early 30s and I'm 58 now. So
over 20 years ago, let's just put it in the context. Over 20 years ago, you had a suicidal thought that if you had acted on, you wouldn't be here today. So that is how your book starts, correct? So
it does now, yes. Because
okay, tell us about that. How were you going to start?
This was the beauty of speaking to you this morning, because my initial start was a very flowery introduction to where I was when it happened. And if you'll permit me, I'll just read it out. The beautiful Brecon Beacons, the majestic mountains of mid Wales. And that's where it happened. Their crevices resemble deep wrinkles on the faces of their slope. The gradual sweep of the hillsides mirror the shape of the wild Welsh ponies' necks that roam the mountains. That was my first paragraph. And you said, well, I think it should be the suicidal thoughts, because I'd already mentioned what they were. And you were right, because now my very first paragraph is, out of nowhere and with no warning, these words jumped into my head from some deep, dark place inside. Drive off. Go on, drive off. Nobody loves you. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to miss you. And that is what happened.
I mean, I was getting goosebumps. And then you could actually describe the backdrop. A few minutes before, you'd be noticing the wrinkles and the ponies. I mean, I think that lyrical beauty of the place is wonderful, how you describe it. Because as you say, you do live in Wales, don't you? And
yes.
And you really, I loved that as you were reading it. And yet, to go the contrast of what was actually about to happen.
I am so pleased, because I mean, in the space of a couple of minutes this morning, and that's literally all, well, what was it, 5-10 minutes in that space, you have made my book, the start of my book, really, really powerful. It was nice before. It was lovely. It was pleasant. And, and I can see the difference straight away. And, I mean, I have carried on, the words resonated, they resounded, they were going through my brain. And then I've led back into my original introduction.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Now that leads into, well, this is where I was when they come into my head, and then the rest of it comes in.
That's fantastic, because, I'm looking at memoirs over time, and the last thing you want is, I was born, I went to school, I mean, there are some people who do write something like that, and that's their prerogative. But if we're writing a book that's going to grip people, that's a memoir. And I think, I haven't read this book, but is it a teaching memoir? Because after that low point in your life, did you then tell me that you went on a long journey? And we mentioned the journey, which we both know about as well, the journey process that Brandon Bayes pioneered. Tell us I think you also had a counselor. You went to a doctor and started counselling. How did you start that journey?
Yeah, well, two things happened really, and these are two of the sort of pivotal things that are in the book as well. One, I started to receive poetry. So poems just seemed to appear. And at that time, they were quite dark, very pitiful, full of self-pity, full of woe. And over time, they have changed and they've become much more lighthearted. Then I had a dearth when I found my current partner. It's almost like they used to come out when I was very, very emotional. And now the difference is I can write a poem about pretty much anything if I empty my mind. So that was one thing that happened. And the other thing that happened was those words coming into my head shocked me. I mean, there's absolutely no two ways about it. It was an absolute shock. And they kicked me into gear, really, rather than kicking me into touch. I knew I needed help. So I actually went to my doctor, and I was very blessed with a very holistic-minded, open-minded doctor who put me in touch with the practice counsellor. And that really started me on a journey into looking at back then they would have been called alternative therapies. I mean, they still classed as that now, I suppose, but a lot of these things are much more mainstream, which is wonderful. But my counsellor mentioned Reiki to me. I didn't really know what it was, and energetic healing. And it just put me on a path of being in a brand new sweet shop. Once I started to come through the depression and actually got myself into a place of strength in conjunction with the tablets and the counselling, and very, very supportive friends and family, and surrounded by a lot of love. Once I finally got to a point of, there's a tipping point, but I can't put my finger on it. I couldn't even when I was looking back, but there comes a tipping point where something changes. And I think it's a gradual process, and then it sort of is almost overnight. But at some point, I was more positive. I started to look forward to life. Part of that was getting my own dog, I have to say. She was very, very a huge part of the therapeutic process. And that's all documented in the book as well, including the poems that have been written along the time. Also, the self-help therapies. So I've mentioned a lot of the therapies.
How did
that
you
have helped
weave?
me.
I wanted to ask you, how did you weave that in? Did you say you came across it and explain it, or do you wait to the end of the chapter to tell people about it?
Yeah, I haven't gone into them in huge detail. What I have done is sort of mentioned them, and it is something that I have thought about. Do I go into more detail, and is that then going to put certain people off? So the way I've done it at the moment is I've woven it into the story, as in I've mentioned what happened at certain points, and maybe the more key therapies, because I mean, I've actually trained in loads. But what I've then done at the back at the very end, there's a list, all of the therapies that actually have helped me, and also where people can find them if they want to look into them themselves.
Yes, that sounds great. So it really is a memoir that if people want to know more, and I think the whole thing today is stories, it's your story, and there are probably other stories in it that you've told of other people, and it really sounds, we all can't wait now to get it published. So is there any stage now that's your next step forward before you're going to go self-publishing, I believe?
Yeah, that's the route I'm going to go down. There are a couple of steps. I have got a couple more tweaks. There's a couple of references that I want to put in. There's a book that was quite pivotal that my counsellor gave me called The Celestine Prophecy.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted it. Basically, I was reading that chapter about synchronicities when loads of synchronicities started to happen. I went to look for my copy, and I know I've had 2 or 3 copies over the years, and I can't find it anywhere. So I've sent off for another copy because I certainly want to reference something from that book. I also am still unsure about how much of the therapeutic side to put in, because I don't want to stuff these things down people's throats, especially if it's not something that they're particularly interested in. But I do want to mention them enough to make people realize how huge they can be, and how pivotal they can be, and how life-changing they can be, and that allopathic medicine is not the only answer.
That's what's empowering about the word empowering you've got in your book, to celebrate. You can also find empowering ways to use, and I think we both discussed it, energy and emotional tools that will shift you and open up a higher perspective for you and put you on track the way I see it, with your life purpose. And can you maybe talk to that? I don't even know if that's in your book, but it sounds like you're more aligned with certain of the therapies, with where you want to go with the book and how it will be a tool. Is that right?
Yes, because there are a couple of therapies that I'm one I've just trained in, Akashic Records. Well, it's not a therapy, it's a process, Akashic Records, but there's also something called EAM, Energy Alignment Method, and also EFT, Emotional Freedom Therapy. They were quite pivotal in the changes that I've gone through myself. And I feel that everybody should have a tool in their own toolbox that they can actually fall back on, that they can continue to do work for themselves, because at the end of the day, it's only us that can change us. Other people can help and hold hands and guide and facilitate, but only the individual can actually make those huge changes for themselves. So I do feel it's really, really important for people to find a tool that will work for them. And there are many, many, many out there.
Today's podcast episode is sponsored by my book, You Can Break Free Fast EFT Tapping, the second edition, which comes with Power Boost, the Law of Attraction with Matrix Reimprinting using EFT tapping. Available on Amazon and other places where you can buy books. Do you feel if people contact you, you'll be able to do some sort of counseling or therapy that you're training in now? Is that what you intend doing?
Yes, I'm going to be putting together some programs. I've currently, I need to finish my EAM mentor training. So I've got case studies to do for that. And then I'm going to be writing some programs based on, so probably putting my own methods together, I suppose.
Offering like online or in-person programs.
Under the banner of Supersonic Self, because really I want everybody to find their supersonic self, whatever that is, and whatever level they feel it is.
That's fantastic. So you've gone from how you started the book and going through that process of healing to opening up the possibility of becoming your supersonic self. It's almost like, it's pity that's not in the title, but there's so many aspects of it that will come out as you finish it.
It's not too late to change.
Well, no, we do. I think we tweak our books till the end. So you also mentioned, I said how important it was to make sure, to go through with a fine-tooth comb for the wording and spelling. And you said actually something that amazed me. You said, what did you say? That's one of your superpowers, to be
well, not an editor. I'm not trained as an editor, but I did do a proofreading course many, many, many years ago. I just didn't go back to do the exam, but it's such a long time ago. I probably couldn't remember the symbols that you used to edit it, but I do have an eye, because loads of people tell me, oh, you're always correcting my grammar, or you're always,
yeah.
If you go to past a pub and they've got an A board and lasagna spelt wrong, and I'm like, oh, lasagna spelt wrong.
Now, there are things which I don't know if you're aware of. We talked about some of the things, but there's something called Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly. You do get software that you can run your work through. I think you're on the right track there, and then you'll probably go the route of putting it up on Amazon, will you, and getting people to write reviews, the initial readers. There's a whole promotional side to it. And as you said, what is your intention? That it gets to number one in certain categories. Well, I'm intending that for you. So you become
to be number one, even if it was just for 1 second.
A best-selling book.
Yeah, well, DebS bestseller would be. Yeah, it would be me. I'm setting the intention. I'm putting it out there.
Well, why not? And when the book's out, I'll have you back on the podcast to show us the cover, because I believe you're on that next step. But show us the cover. You haven't shown us the cover that you've had, a working cover. And I said to you before you showed it to us, I said to you that when I teach writing the book inside you, one of the things I say is that Wayne Dyer used to get a cover for every book he was writing and wrap it around another book, put the title on and had it in front of him. So I believe in having a working cover. Show us your one.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when I told you that, I sort of did that out of instinct, because I wanted something tangible to see. And it's highly unlikely this is what it's going to look like. But I do wish I'd found your program 2 years ago, because I think I'd be much further ahead now. But yeah, so this is what I mocked up for myself.
Yeah.
And it was just to have something tangible, as I said, that I could see, that sits on my desk, that reminds me that this is actually going to be a book. It's not just pie in the sky.
I love that. For I can tell people to do that or suggest it, but there you did it on your own instinct. And I mean, it's got the colors on the wall, which is so that green ultramarine.
Oh, God.
Those could be
Yes,
your
I hadn't
colors.
thought about that.
And that sort of turquoise you're wearing, I mean, maybe that in the end, that should be somehow on the cover, when you finally get the designs in. So thanks, Deb. Now, I know you're going to be publishing under the name Deb. Tell us, DebS, is it? When you do?
Yeah, it's actually DebS, and if I can get away with one word, and it's not that I think I'm as famous as Madonna, but I don't need a second name or anything. I still go by my ex-husband's surname, just out of ease. No other reason than I've been too lazy to bother going back to my maiden name, because I mean we've been divorced for about 20 odd years. I lost my father about 2 years, and I just as a sort of a nod to him, really. And a lot of people call me Debs anyway. It's my sort of nickname, my pet name. And I just thought it would be really nice to capitalize the S, because my maiden name is Smith. So it's sort of a little tribute to my dad, really. So if I'm allowed to sort of fill in forms with no surname, then I hope that all of my writing from now on will be under that name. So just Deb, Deb with capital
I
S.
think you could call that a pen name, and I think I'm sure Amazon allows that. You obviously need your real name and where they can send you the money that you're going to make from when you sell your book. But you can use the name Deb, as you say, Debs, and with a capital S, and it's in a way it's like a poet. It's got a poetic, creative feel to it, and as you're going to have some of your poems in your book.
Yes, very much so.
Very much so. So it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and we look forward to having you on the show with the finished book. So keep us posted and keep inspiring us in writing the book inside your group on Facebook.
Oh, I will do. It's been a delight. And I have to say, I was drawn to the group because it was your description that spoke to me. It was do I have a life story to tell? Tick, yeah. What else was on it? Life lessons and skills to learn. Tick, yeah. Do I have a healing message? I think
yes, to help. And it was just world.
Like I was like, oh, tick, tick, tick. Yeah, I really do want to help. I really would love this book to help more than one person. But in my eyes, if it just helps one person to go, do you know what? Yes, there can be life after all of these things, and life is worth living. I mean, there's absolutely no two ways about it. I didn't think it was back then. I thought my whole future was just going to be nothing. So to sort of hindsight's a very wonderful sight, isn't it?
Yes. Well, what we did talk about earlier, which the listeners might be interested in, is that when you were going through something like that, only as you developed interest in healing modalities, did you come to the realization that it all started in childhood? Mm-hmm. When I first set out to teach people EFT, I used to say, as you tap and talk, you can ask, what set this up? Those were the words I used. And then you'll have a break-free aha that, when I was a child, this happened. And I think, it might be nice to, before you go, to share how that impacted you, that realization. What is the story for you?
Yes, for me, when I was a child, my mum had mental health issues. She had post-baby blues, and she ran away. She took my youngest brother with her. We know that I was 6 because of the age of my brother. And we've talked about it as an adult, and she said that she wouldn't have taken him if she'd have had a choice. It was just because she was breastfeeding. She just needed to get away. And so that caused me to feel abandoned. I, as a 6-year-old child with no manual of life, thought there must be something wrong with me. And I feel I went through a process of trying to make her laugh, to make her love me more, so it wouldn't happen again. But it did happen again because she was taken away to a mental institute. So within a very short space of time, I lost my mum twice. Or my mum abandoned me in my head.
In inverted commas, yes.
Yeah. And so the belief that I created as a little child was that I was clearly unlovable. So when the divorce happened and the person that's supposed to love me more than anything in the world, i.e. my mum, then my husband, it all fell apart. Basically what happens, and as you know, but it pulls on all of those emotions that were around back then that were hidden because I didn't know they were there, because I grew up after that having a lovely childhood. So all of these were stuffed down. They were in there subconsciously. They were in my energy. And it was then when they come out again, not only do they come out with that bit, but they come out with that bit from back there as well. So you've got twice the amount.
So it's like your jersey is starting to unravel completely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or what do you call it, a cardigan?
Yeah, jersey is fine, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so the one thread starts and you think it's, and then the whole thing's unraveling and you're unraveling. So I think that if you make that point in the book, people will start to understand that it's not just something that happens to them. It can be childhood beliefs and traumas, big or small. And I think that's such an important part of the healing journey we take. It's not for everyone. Maybe, people think, well, I wasn't abused. It wasn't a big trauma, but it can be something that just stays subconsciously buried. And once it comes out, it helps the domino effect. Everything changes.
Well, it could be something as simple, as you said, I wasn't abused. I didn't have a bad childhood. Other than that, I had a wonderful childhood. It can be something as simple as somebody being made to stand up in front of the class and read out loud, and the rest of the class laughing because they've stumbled over a word.
Well, I'm pleased you're using that analogy, because it's one of the big things. I call myself the tapping book coach. It's often when people come to write their story in their book, they often have to clear memories like that, which they don't realize are absolutely frozen in time and space and keeping them blocked. So that's a very good point. It's not that they were hit over the head or physically abused, but just being laughed at by the class teacher. I think I read something recently which really resonated with me. She said she was 6 years old and they asked her to write her story of the holidays. And she said, well, I went to see my grandpa and grandma on the farm, and we did this and we did that. And she said the essay came back with, the margins are too small, C. And she said from that moment on, it was like her whole experience had been given a C. Her grandfather was a C level, and her grandmother. And I think it's so powerful to unearth if that did happen to us, and then repair the damage of that, classrooms or siblings or parents. So we have gone on a little bit about my favorite topic, but I think we're of like minds, and you're exactly the kind of person I'm thrilled to be able to say, to give a little push with your book now. So it becomes you become like what I call the shining, sparkling unicorn in a sea of sameness, showing the world. I don't know if you saw that was one of the things that attracted you, but that's how I see, if we just go along with our knowledge and our healing, but then we write a book that really helps us stand out and help others and make a difference, then we are suddenly that sparkling unicorn that people want to speak to and have on podcasts and be out there in the world. So I'm looking forward to seeing your journey.
And I would love, and I really, really would love to encourage others to write their book and write their story, even if they don't publish it, because just the process of doing that was hugely cathartic for me as well.
That's a good point.
Because I had to show it to my mum, because obviously she's mentioned, her mental health was mentioned in it. And she admitted to me that she had tried to commit suicide when she was younger, and I didn't know that, not even as an adult. So it's brought us closer together as well. And you don't necessarily have to share your book with anybody, I think, but that's for some people and not for others. But certainly in the process of writing it, it's very, very cathartic, very therapeutic.
So that's a
I would
good
certainly
point.
Encourage people to do it, even if they don't do anything with it, even if they then burn it up into the universe on a full moon, whatever they want to do with it.
I was just writing an email on grief. Some people find that helpful. Some people paint. Some people, go into inside. Some people want support. But whatever you do, writing is one of the ways that I've always used, my journaling and my writing. And as you say, for your memoir, for your story, to get it out there, you can always edit it into a different shape later. Or leave something out or, delete. But at least to get it down is very cathartic, especially with a bit of tapping.
Yes,
if you come up with things. So thank you once again. And anywhere along the way you need my help, let me know.
Thank you so much. Well, you've been a great help so far. So, and it's been a delight. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on today's podcast. Want a free gift to inspire you further on your book writing adventure? My free checklist, 5 book hook tips to kickstart your book writing journey, will help you get clarity on the key essentials to make your book a winner. Download it at writethebookinsideyou.com/free gift. The links are in the show notes. Until next time, a big virtual hug and keep writing. Free gift to inspire you further on your book writing adventure? My free checklist, 5 book hook tips to kickstart your book writing journey, will help you get clarity on the key essentials to make your book a winner. Download it at writethebookinsideyou.com/free gift. The links are in the show notes. Until next time, a big virtual hug and keep writing.